Jimmy, can you help me again? Jimmy, can you help me again?
Hit and miss.
No, it's not in the, all right. Okay, well, that was good. I'm gonna get everybody in here to make sure.
Yeah. Well, it's live now,
We
but
got it.
it's okay. It's not picking up any sound. Gets a good picture
My
then.
engineer trained.
Okay.
Well, these things.
There's not much you can do about it.
Are they in the way?
Yeah, they're in the
They're always
way.
in the way. You go up like that, maybe.
Okay.
And call Lola at 727-441-3311. The book costs only $6.99, so do yourself a favor and buy the book today.
Hi, this is Misty Wells, your host of Let's Take It Outside. Join me every Friday, 5 p.m. on your ride home. We'll talk about getting outside, getting dirty, fishing, hunting, diving, and camping. Whatever you like to do when you take it outside. Spend your afternoons with me, Misty Wells, Friday, 5 o'clock, right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hello there, Tampa Bay. This is former NFL and college football coach Jimmy Johnson. Listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They can sure use the attention.
And this is former Major League Baseball player, Hall of Famer Wade Bogg. I also hope you listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They can darn sure use the money.
Hi there. This is Marine Wildlife Officer Conservationist Fieldworthy.
If you would like to become a wholesale buyer of the premium quality longevity product that you hear about right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network for personal service, you can pick up the phone right now and call Lola at 727-441-3311. Again, that's Lola at 727-441-3311. Or for even faster service, log on to tantalkhealth.com. That's tantalkhealth.com. Here's to your health and longevity.
Tom O'Brien is on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Every Monday through Friday from 4 till 5 p.m., Tom takes to the airwaves as he breaks down the day's market action. Tom combines his technical knowledge of the markets with his years of trading experience to take your calls and questions every market day from 4 to 5 p.m. Whether you're new to trading or an active day trader, don't miss out on the Tom O'Brien Show live on the Tan Talk Radio Network from 4 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Live in a condo or homeowners association? Do you have issues? How about questions? Tune in to the Ameritech Connection every Thursday at 5 p.m. on Tan Talk Radio Network. That's 1340 AM and 106.1 FM. Right, Sharon?
That's right, Mike. We cover it all when it comes to deed-restricted communities. We have the answers to all of your questions and more on the Ameritech Connection every Thursday at 5 p.m. on Tan Talk Radio Network, 1340 AM and 106.1 FM.
Republicans appointed Donald Trump president, then changed vote count from 60 to 51 to pack the Supreme Court with Citizens United oligarchs. DonFromLargo.com, Mondays 9 to 10 a.m. on the Tan Talk Radio Network. DonFromLargo.com, Mondays 9 to 10 a.m. Tan Talk Radio Network. Liberty, equality, justice for all. The truth as I see it. Thank you.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
The casino is the second largest monument to human gullibility ever built. What's the first? We'll tell you right now on the Atheist Forum. You are about to enter the no superstition zone of rational thinking and intellectual curiosity here on the Atheist Forum. Standing by for your questions or comments at 727-441-3000, where you can talk to a real live atheist here on Tan Talk 1340. As you can imagine, this being the Atheist Forum, we recognize the largest monument to human gullibility to be the church. Religion is a remarkable enterprise. They invent the disease, sell you the cure, and it never works. The disease, of course, is sin, and the fact is there is no such thing. Well, today on the Atheist Forum, we're going to tell you about atheism from our point of view. And later on in the program, we'll hear from David Williamson regarding a lawsuit in Orlando asserting the right of prayer to be imposed on all of us in public gatherings, whether we like it or not. Ed Golly with Jim Peterson, Joe Reinhardt in the 10 Talk Radio Network studio, the voice of atheism in Florida. Our website is talk.aof.ngo, and you can insult an atheist for only $2 if you like.
Oh, Ed, can I just interject very briefly here that we do have a new offer this afternoon for our viewers and listeners, and that is the answer to your prayers. That's right. I don't want to boast, but the fact of the matter is I can answer your prayer just like any other deity. I operate under the same rules, and so for any of our viewers or listeners who would like to have the object of their heart's desire fulfilled, call us anytime in the next 30 minutes, and I personally will see that your prayer is answered. So here's a chance to put the power of prayer to the test. Thank you.
Prayer line is open at 441-3000. Or you can simply insult us for only $2. This is a golden opportunity. Go ahead, Jimmy.
When you said that you can answer prayers like any other deity, that means that you're a deity.
Well, as I said, I don't want to appear too immodest.
Well, no. and certainly you're the most animated deity I've yet to encounter. I'm duly impressed.
Well, don't make me have to turn you into a frog.
Well, to begin with, all of us are born atheists. Everyone who's ever been born was born an atheist. Most of us then are indoctrinated into the religion that dominates the culture, the time, and the geography of our birth. So, for example, if you'd been born here in Florida 500 years ago, you would believe in probably something of the order of the Great Spirit of the Sky and embrace native religions that are never heard of by the Western invaders who brought Christianity to our shores. Well, the typical story of salvation from religion is one where the religionist in their late teens to early 20s begins to question the stories that they've been sold, and denied sensible answers, they apply rational thinking against the religious dogma, which then leads them to a rejection of the beliefs that they've been indoctrinated to all through their childhood, and ultimately to atheism. Now, I happen to be the exception to the rule. Both my parents were atheists. I was never indoctrinated. I was told to tell everybody I'm a Presbyterian, but I didn't know a Presbyterian from a libertarian. I had no idea what these religious rituals were about because we never went to church, both parents being atheists, but that's very rare. And so I'm going to ask each of my associates today, after Joe interjects a spotlight of wisdom here.
I do, and that is that Presbyterians is an anagram for Britney Spears.
I did not know that. See, they didn't tell me.
That's a little message from above. Bible code. If you want to look it up, Britney Spears spells Presbyterians.
Perfect. Well, as long as you're hogging the mic, Joe, why don't you tell us a little about how you managed to divorce yourself from whatever religious indoctrination you had.
Well, I can do that briefly, Ed.
The briefer the better?
The briefer the better. Brevity is the essence of wit.
Your time's up. How about you, Jim?
Well, started.
Go ahead.
I was raised as a evangelical United Brethren, whatever that is, I'm not quite sure. But I was very devout up until I was about 12 years old. I had, pins for not missing a single Sunday or Bible study, and went to church camp, and I could recite the Ten Commandments and the Beatitudes and all things like that. And then I started reading Homer. I read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and of course, it involves all these other dozens of deities, and there were amazing similarities between those and the one that I was indoctrinated with, and it didn't take long until I realized that These stories are amazingly similar, and only the names have been changed to protect the guilty.
And so what about mid-20s or so?
No, by the time I was 12, I was a serious doubter.
Really?
And by the
Wow,
time I got
that's
into
unusual.
junior high school, I didn't believe it at all. And it wasn't until I was about 16 when the subject ever came up amongst my friends and I was the only one that took the position that it was bogus.
What did the family think?
Well, happily, while we were regular church attendees, I wouldn't describe them as fundamentalists. They didn't take it too hard.
Okay.
They weren't very happy with it, but I wasn't shunned or cut off from the family or any of the other sanctions that other.
And the money you saved from the collection plate you used for drugs, that got you started on your...
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Drugs, gambling, prostitution. Sure.
Talk to me, Jimmy.
But you were the only member of the junior iconoclasts in your school, I imagine.
I suppose I was.
Yes.
What's your story, Jim Peterson?
My story. Well, it's complicated because the transition from being a believer to an unbeliever is not an easy one. It doesn't only involve logic and comparing the various narratives of the various religions and their accompanying doctrines and so forth, and finding that there's a lot of misleading and completely false nonsense in them. But it also involves a very, very large emotional component as well, because when you're brought up in a religion, you are brought up by people, by parents, teachers. I was hauled off to a Catholic school, brought up by Catholic parents, and instilled with a very fine-honed sense of Catholic guilt, which has accompanied all my life. You really can't get rid of it entirely. It's always there.
Such as yourself, I can understand.
Yes, of course. I have a great deal to be guilty about, I'm sure. But nevertheless, I was able to, by the accident of reading, mainly philosophy, because I was very interested in philosophy, and this taught me a great deal about how to look at and analyze church doctrine. But seeing the nonsense of which it was largely composed, I still had the problem of being emotionally shaped by the religion itself. So it took me a little bit longer than it took for you, Joe, and much longer than it took for Ed. But I guess I was about maybe 15 to 17 when I finally broke through and was able to say, I am not a believer. I'm not a Catholic anymore.
But it was the act of reading that really breaks down the doors.
Yes. You have to have
We have that in common.
Yeah, the intellectual experience that makes a difference.
Who was it that said the greatest avenue, or the most expeditious avenue to atheism would be reading the Bible?
Isaac Asimov.
Well, Jim,
He wrote the book.
Let's get back to the fundamentals here. The definition of atheist. There's a lot of word association going on with that word, such as communist, devil worshiper, child molester, and so on. Brett Kavanaugh, maybe? I don't know. But anyway,
Well,
give us the definition, which is improbably simple.
It is, and it's very simple indeed. The word, when taken apart, there is an example of a religious believer as a theist, one who at base holds that there is a God. So the one who lives their lives and who does not believe that there is a God is an atheist. It's like anything else. If you add an A to it, that means that's the contrary to whatever the base is.
Yeah. So it extends, though, doesn't it, to all the supernatural commodities that we hear about, right? Whether it's angels, devils, souls, heaven, hell, purgatory.
Let's not forget the agnostics. Gnostic means to know. So, and in this case, it was anchored in ancient times. It meant to know something about the supernatural. And so an agnostic is one who does not know. And that's important to remember, because virtually an agnostic and an atheist is really the same thing.
I have seen long articles explaining in detail the difference between atheist and agnostic, and I have come to the conclusion that I can't tell them apart.
The way
Can't be one
I,
without being the other.
but the agnostic says there may be a God, I don't see any evidence of it, and there's no way to know about it. Whereas the atheist, I think, looks at it and says, wait a minute, I realize that all of these ideas about gods and supernatural commodities evolved from an effort to explain the universe that people lived in, absent any science to help them understand it. So they thought there must be some force that was causing a thunderstorm or a disease or a crop failure, and they didn't know anything about meteorology, so they thought some commodity was causing it to happen, even going back to how did life start? How did the humans come about? Who was the first human, and so on. And so, since they had no science to understand it, the logical conclusion of all societies was there was something that could create it, control it, and could be negotiated with to cause good results. Am I right?
Yes.
So the atheist says, well, all right, so all the God ideas were made up by people who didn't know how things worked, whereas the agnostic says, well, there might be a God because somebody said so, I just don't see the evidence. I see a difference there.
I think the final decision or point comes down to the atheist and the agnostic both say ultimately the same thing, and that is the evidence, such as it is not adequate to the task. I like this quote. I forget who said it. It said, the evidence on the werewolf question rises to a greater level of believability than the evidence on the God question.
Yes.
So an atheist, as one myself, I'd be happy to change my mind if I'm presented with some better evidence. If that makes me an agnostic, call me whatever you want. I won't be insulted. I've been called worse. For $2, you can call me up right now and call me worse.
That's right. We're going to talk about some of the common arguments that we hear when those of us who are atheists try to explain it to a religionist, and answer some of these arguments that we commonly hear. I think one that is commonly heard by those of us of the community of reason is you simply cannot disprove the existence of a God. Therefore, it's as rational to believe it as it is to disbelieve it, because neither of you guys can disprove it. How would you respond?
It's impossible to disprove categorically virtually anything, literally anything on this planet. I cannot disprove that Santa Claus doesn't actually exist. He might not be up at the North Pole. He just might not be there when you went to look for him. We don't know for sure. So the argument that, you can't prove that it doesn't exist, therefore I win the argument is specious. And it's specious on its face because the believer is the person making the assertion, and the weight of the argument, the responsibility to prove the argument falls on the person making the assertion. I don't have to prove anything. I'm still waiting for better evidence. I said a minute ago, call me up and give me some better evidence. I'll convert right here on the air.
Yes,
waiting.
You may wait a while for that.
I've been waiting for 60-some years.
No, I'll tell you what, listen to me. If you can convince us to accept a God belief, Joe has agreed to attend the church of your choice in Pinellas County, one service a week for the entire calendar year of 2019, and tithe 10% of his unadjusted gross income payable at the first service that he attends. So call us up at 441-3000. Convince us that a God exists, and Joe will be sitting next to you in church all next year. Isn't that right, Joe?
You can buy my soul right now.
I just did.
I'll pay for another $5. I'll sell you my right to run for president.
But at any rate, of all the knowledge which exists, there basically are three categories: that which is true, that which is false, and that which is nonsensical. Now, if something is true or false, you have evidence to demonstrate it. The absence of evidence, of course, in the case of a false claim, weighs nothing, as does the impossibility of finding evidence. For instance, you could say that On Saturn, there's a jar of mayonnaise located close to the North Pole. Now, theoretically, you could determine that in principle, but in a practical sense, it's impossible. So therefore, the claim is advanced on nonsense. And if you look into the person making the claim, you would say, they're crazy. Which kind of limits the range of possibilities when you're trying to
Not if
make
the
a
claim
logical
is
point.
followed by an offering.
Yeah, well, like lettuce, tomatoes, and bacon, that sort of thing would be helpful.
Well, a lot of times we suggest that none of these entities or commodities that are associated with religion, such as souls or angels or gods, are visible to us. We can't see them anywhere. It used to be thought that they were sitting up on top of the clouds or the highest mountains, and they looked down on these societies and controlled them. Then we could get up to the clouds and we couldn't see them. So, well, that they're out of the atmosphere, they're out, beyond the local environment of Earth. We got up there, the cosmonauts went up and said, we're looking all over the place, we don't see any God, heaven, and so on. So the argument can then come back to us that, well, you can't see air. So, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? You know it exists, because if you put a laundry bag over your head, you're going to suffocate. So just because we can't see something doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist. Isn't that right?
Yes, for instance, many of the most powerful forces in the universe in terms of cosmic rays and X-rays and a whole variety
Electricity, radio waves.
That's right. They're all invisible, but they still can be detected. If you, as you grow into a technological civilization, you begin to find a lot more things that you didn't know before, especially about biology and about physics and everything.
Magnetism.
And that replaces the God beliefs that used to dominate the lives of our ancestors to such a great degree. Explains why more than 30% of people nowadays are unchurched. Many of whom are atheists and agnostics and so on, but the number of people who no longer have allegiance to a religious institution is continuing to grow, and this is borne out by the latest Pew statistics. You can look it up online.
And you think, Joe, that kind of makes the argument for us. We know what air is. We know how much it weighs. We know what its pressure is, what constitutes it. We know what X-rays are, radio waves. We know how to transmit radio waves so somebody can listen to this program. So why can't we see the other things that are asserted to be in existence but invisible, like a soul or a god or an angel?
Well, possibly because there really is a connection between the invisible and the non-existent. There's been attempts to measure the soul at the moment of death, and that's hard to do because your other bodily functions cease at the same time, and so you tend to lose some weight.
Soul in Greek meant breath, and so when you died, your breath left your body, and that was it.
Sure, because if a soul had weight, then isn't it mandatory that it has mass? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it can't have any weight. Isn't that right?
Yes.
So we should be able to detect it and find it.
And where is it for the infinity of time before you're using it?
Yeah, how could you be brain dead if your conscience can survive you when your brain is gone? It'd be impossible to be diagnosed as brain dead. Your soul would function in place of it.
What does your soul do while it's waiting around for you to be born?
I don't know.
And the other important thing, and although this is a brief summary, but everything that constitutes a human being resides basically in our brain. Our perception,
Yes.
memory, everything that we are lives in our brain. And when our brain stops, and we know it will stop, we stop. It's just simple as that. It's not
Loss of oxygen
complicated at
to
all.
the brain.
Yeah, and we should learn to accept that. It's
Isn't
a
it a fact
reasonable
that
thing.
all atheists convert to religion when they're on their deathbed?
Not
No,
if they're reasonable.
no, and no. I will quote, H.L. Mencken did say that in order to be truly free, you had to be a second or third generation non-believer, that too often the skeptic died with the cross on his lips and the oil on his feet.
Well, there's a lot of fear around that.
Well, I've got nothing to lose. I
that's
suppose,
true.
Strikes you. But Voltaire, for instance, was supposed to have recanted, and apparently what really happened was that he made the priest there to deliver the last rites. He upset him by saying, "Get away from me," and the priest was upset because he messed up his hairdo. That's apparently what actually
What about the
happened.
fact that the best-selling book of all time is the Bible?
So what?
So all those people can't be wrong, can they? Isn't that the argument they give us?
Everybody in all previous history has been wrong about everything. Been wrong about gravity, wrong about the stars and the universe, just been wrong. They didn't know anything about chemistry or anything about anything. And we've only acquired this knowledge fairly recently over a short course of time.
It's wrong even if it's true, because it's a logical fallacy. It's an appeal to numbers. All of my friends are doing this, therefore it's cool. Well, would you jump off a cliff if all your friends? You've heard that.
Of course.
You have parents, right?
What about atheists in foxholes? Are there any such thing?
No more so than anybody else in a foxhole. I mean,
Atheists would prefer not to be in foxholes.
I personally know at least 2 atheists who served in Vietnam. One of them almost died there. And he said that he was laying down, he knew he was dying, he's a medic. And he didn't think at all about God. The only thing he thought about as he was dying, and luckily he didn't, they got him in a copter and out of there, but the only thing he thought about was, I wish I had a clean sheet to lie on.
Wow.
So much for converting on your deathbed. Atheists in foxholes.
Yeah, it doesn't speak to how many rather I should have said Christians are in foxholes and people praying and they end up dead. So what good does that do them? Right? They aren't there to tell you, yeah, I was praying constantly and I got a bullet right between my eyes.
But they all went to heaven.
Yeah.
How do we know that? Did they ever come back?
A fellow walked up to our stand at the Festival of Reading last year, and he looked at us and he realized we're the atheists. He says, all of this had to come from somewhere. That answered everything for him. It didn't just happen. All the trees and the air and the birds and the people and everything that you see, he said, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It had to come from somewhere.
The argument from a tree. There's a tree, there must be a God. That's basically what he's saying. I can't explain why there are trees. Therefore, not only is there a God, we don't need to keep looking to try to ever understand why there are trees.
And this works out fine.
Only God can make a tree. I have it on good authority.
Until you have botany.
Might have been Joyce Kilmer.
Yeah.
I'd like to know is why did God make a mosquito? What was he thinking about that? But I think that a human mind cannot possibly contemplate the time frames in which all of this evolution took place. We're talking about billions or hundreds of billions of years. We really, it's asserted that everything started with a Big Bang, but maybe all of this matter had already been a universe that collapsed on itself and did so a dozen times over.
My understanding of the creation of the universe is absolutely zero. But my opinion on the subject is, who cares? I mean, it's a subject of interest and speculation to a lot of people, and I don't blame them. But it doesn't affect my life one iota as to the exact circumstances of the Big Bang or no Big Bang.
So you do know something about it.
I'm here. I'd like to make the best of it, and how I got here is not really my major concern. How to make the best of it while I am here bothers me a lot.
Yes.
So atheists are no longer a teeny tiny little percentage of the population of this country or of Western Europe and probably of the world's population. We can estimate that we may be as high as 18%, with maybe 40% that simply have no affiliation with any religion and don't involve themselves in the rituals and so on. Yet the conservatives still think they have some kind of inherent right to impose religion on all of us, and if they're denied that, then they claim that they're being denied their freedom of religion. We're going to talk about that after we just take a short break to tell you a little bit about Atheists of Florida and who we are and what we're all about. And when we return, we have our friend David Williamson on the line, who's going to check in from Orlando to tell us about a case that's going on over there that addresses that issue and speaks directly to it. We'll be right back here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Atheists of Florida is a nonprofit membership organization founded in 1992. For over 25 years, Atheists of Florida has brought atheists together to address state-church separation issues, provide legal assistance in cases of religious discrimination in employment or educational institutions, help atheists meet others who want to live their lives free of religion, and produce the Atheist Forum. For membership information, visit our website at atheistofflorida.com, where you'll find our newsletters, annual reports, statement of purpose, and information about meetings and events. That's atheistofflorida.com.
Do you believe in magic in a young girl's heart? How the music can free her whenever it starts, and it's magic if the music is
Okay, so is it going to be Fitz Magic or Fitz Tragic? We'll find out Sunday on the gridiron. That could be interesting. We don't believe in magic. We believe in illusions, but we certainly don't believe in gods, souls, heavens, angels, or lakes of fire. We are atheists, and we're more than happy to talk about it with you here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. You're welcome to give us the benefit of your opinion at 441-3000. And if you're giving any consideration to the arguments that we've given you, you'll definitely be interested in calling in today, because if you call this hour, we're going to send you your very own Get Out of Hell free card. Our engineer will take your name and address, and you will soon be receiving your own personal card delivered to your mailbox by uniformed government agent, along with a few other fun items we can stuff into the envelope. No salesman will call, and as long as you're on the phone, go ahead and chat with us here on the Atheist Forum. Joining us from Orlando, David Williamson. Hello, David. Thanks for checking in today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure. How's everyone doing?
Hello, David.
Good to hear from you. Great, just great. Thank you.
We're talking about a dispute that goes back to 2012, I think. Isn't that right? Oh, I'm sorry, 15, when Cambridge Christian found itself in a state championship football game against Jacksonville University Christian in your hometown of Orlando. As I understand it, the Cambridge Christian School had pre-game prayers over the PA system for the entire fan base, everybody that was there at the stadium. The parents asserted that they could then pray with their children before the game, and when they ended up in Orlando, they were in a state-run event where the Florida High School Activities Association said they couldn't play a role in the religious display. So we have the argument that state-church separation asserts that a government-run stadium cannot be broadcasting prayers to everybody, while the religionists are saying that violates my freedom of religious expression to impose it on everybody, because otherwise I can't pray. And that's where you came in.
Yeah, so that sums it up really well, Ed. The school is actually in Tampa. The game was actually here at the stadium in Orlando, and they need a bigger space for two big teams meeting at the end of the year. And the high school athletic association is made up of private and public schools. So the benefit of participation is offered to private schools, and many of those, what is it, 80% of them are religious and Christian, and they get to participate too, which is great. And they pray when they have games on their campuses all year long, and other Christian schools pray when they have games on their campuses all year long, and even in the semifinals when they have games at non-government events. Like the Camping World Stadium here in Orlando, they were able to have a prayer because the organization, the FHSAA, wasn't controlling the event and the speech at the event. So this is actually a lot of different issues, right? Religious expression, the second clause of the First Amendment, and then establishment, which is the first clause, but also free speech, because the school is asserting that their free speech rights were violated and that they were discriminated against based on their viewpoint. And this claim is false because they are not discriminated against based on their viewpoint. The controlling organization of the game is the government, and the government refuses to give up the microphone to just anybody for anything. There are set policies and practices and procedures that are in place, and prayer is not one of them. But funny enough, nobody was told they couldn't pray. They were just told they couldn't do it on the PA system at the stadium.
Kind of restores, you should pardon the expression, our faith in the Constitution, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Doesn't
But
it?
we've got to, and we've got to be grateful for the FHSAA for actually refusing, for not backing down, and for actually going to court. As the defendant in this case, Cambridge Christian sued and lost, and is now appealing. And just Wednesday, there were oral arguments in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which our organization is headed to on another case that we've talked about before, the Brevard government prayer case. We're going to be going there in just a few months to have our case heard. But it's interesting for those, legal geeks that want to hear the arguments. It was about an hour long, and you can find it on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals audio files page. I just listened to that yesterday. It's been a busy week, especially in Washington, so I've been kind of busy watching that. But I heard the oral arguments, and it was very good. But this was not the ACLU, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, American Atheists, or CFI. It was just the FHSAA's own attorneys defending their right to control the microphone at this event. And the Christian school hasn't backed down and is, perhaps well funded and continuing to fight. But we'll see how far it goes.
David, it seems to me the most obvious argument would be that since it's a government microphone, that they do not, that is the Christian athletes do not have the right to control it. The same rules apply there as it applies to City Hall or any other public government-controlled manifestation, schools or anything else. You can't just get up and get hold of the mic and start praying or start any sort of religious activities that are in fact banned by the Constitution, not just the federal but the state Constitution. Right. And it's even more specific than that. I think we tend to speak in generalities, and I do as well, about the non-establishment clause. But in this case, and in the case we brought in 2013 against Orange County Public Schools, this was about discriminatory actions, or this was claimed in this case to be discriminatory action by the government in prohibiting free speech, as when they censored our literature in the schools here. So this is really not as much an establishment clause case as it is a free speech case. But the government agency, I guess it's a quasi-government agency, the FHSAA is government sanctioned, and they refused to give up the microphone, stating that it would be an entanglement with religion. And there's some interesting arguments going back and forth, and it's a far cry from the initial conversation that happened between the school and the MC at the game. And now we're a few years down the road and in court, and attorneys are fighting it out. And but we've got to be grateful to the FHSAA, and we've got to continue to be vigilant and watch for these things, because we're having complaints coming in weekly about prayer in schools, football games with chaplains. I mean, this is a continuing problem, and we've got to be vigilant, whether we're atheists or Christian or anything else. We want to make sure that our kids are not having religion imposed on them just by the will of their coaches and their teachers.
Is there anything in the record from the school on, since they're such champions of freedom of speech, on permitting the freedom of speech at the football game or elsewhere around the school of other people, say if people have nice things to say about Mohammed or Adolf Hitler or Madeline Murray O'Hare? Would that be okay too?
Yeah, I doubt the school has a free speech policy. I think they're probably locked down well more than public schools are.
That's a rhetorical question.
Sure, there's a rhetorical answer too.
Just their hypocrisy showing, that's all.
Absolutely. Yeah, freedom is not what this is about. This is about privilege and stopping privilege in its tracks, because these schools and some religious folks, not all of them, have been carrying on their lives, imposing their religion on everyone willy-nilly. And when the government is involved in this, we can put a stop to it. And sometimes we can't, and sometimes we can, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but we've got to keep up the fight. And we're grateful for you guys talking about this and all the effort that you do on state-church separation as well.
Well, the legal niceties beside, it seems to me that there is some sort of a merger going on between religion and football in particular, but sports in general as well. in that a lot of these cases originate on the field with people like Bobby Bowden insisting on praying before each game and so on and so forth. And he has joined himself into various of these legal actions. What is going on in the country? Why is football especially, and especially in high schools and other scholastic venues, why is that such a target for religious enthusiasts?
So that's a good question, and I actually have an answer for you. There's two things I would put into the microscope here, and one would be the nature of Christianity and its need to grow, and its actual mandate to spread the gospel. When coaches, the majority of them are going to be Christian, when coaches are told by their pastors and religious leaders and their peers that they need to impose their religion on their students because this is a tenet of their religion, then I would not expect anything less. Now, that is from their religious perspective. When they put their school hat on and their coach hat on, they have to give up that right to free expression because they don't have it when they walk into the classroom, when they walk onto the ball field. They don't have that right to free expression that you and I have when we work in our own places of business that we perhaps own or work on our own. We're subject to the will of the company, but in the government setting, coaches, administrators, and others have to set that aside and play secular for all of the students, because the rights of the students are sacrosanct when it comes to their rights to non-establishment. The right of free expression of the coaches and staff is not as important as the rights of the students. And the second issue I would take would be the Fellowship of Christian Athletes in particular, and other similar organizations, and we have a dozen or more in Florida. So this organization has made it its goal to recruit coaches whose goal is to recruit students to pray and proselytize to one another. And in some cases, they cross the line, and the coaches are engaged in the prayer, and the coaches are engaged in the proselytizing. The coaches will bring pastors into locker rooms. We're seeing this across the state, and we need folks to be vigilant for this. This is a problem. If you see something, say something. Talk to the Atheists of Florida, talk to the Central Florida Free Thought community, talk to the national organizations, learn what's okay, and if something seems fishy, figure out what's going on and whether or not it should happen. And we can put a complaint letter in from one of the national organizations. The attorneys will do that, and they'll set them straight. And most of the time, they figure out they've done something wrong and they fix it. And we don't just go to the coach. We go to the school board, and the school attorneys typically say, hey, what's going on here? And then there's a wholesale change, hopefully across the county, because school boards in Florida are by county. So we don't go to the coach, we go to the top so that they can fix any fundamental problems that exist in the system.
So if it's getting increasingly difficult to convince students with the Bibles and the Bronze Age myths to embrace religion, they're now taking it to the gridiron, right? So that a kid who never walks in a church is being indoctrinated on the sports field.
Doesn't the Times article say something about how, if you're a student, people go insane because they won't let you kneel? On the other hand, if you're Colin Kaepernick, they go insane because you do.
That was a letter to the editor. It was really well written,
It was actually a columnist, John Bordano, I think was his name, and he wrote about that. And I don't parallel the NFL players kneeling during the national anthem with students praying on the loudspeaker, but I think it is an interesting parallel to think about. Yeah.
That's about all they have in common. I'll grant you that.
Yeah. So we definitely have coaches who are intending to, and it's their own reasoning is telling them that if I bring these teams together in the gospel or in Jesus' name, then I'm going to have a stronger team. And that's probably true if you're somewhere like Cambridge Christian. But when you're in a public school, you probably have 2% Jew, 1% Muslim, 20-30% non-religious. So we can't have coaches picking the religion for the team. We can't even have the team picking the religion for itself in some democratic process of naming a team chaplain. These things are not permitted.
Yeah, that's a big problem, because I can see where this is not just offensive against, in some legalistic way, against the constitutions, state and federal, but also against the players whose religious beliefs may strongly differ from the kind of prayer that's been adopted and officially promoted by their coaches or their teams or their association, whatever. That's another large problem, and an opportunity also to educate people about the real meaning of freedom of religion. It's not the freedom for religions to dominate society, but the freedom of each individual person to decide what sort of religious beliefs they will have. And it's not the business of government, and probably not really the business of teams and coaches to be promoting religious beliefs.
But Jim, isn't that what the state legislature is doing when they passed this law last year that took effect in this calendar school year, that every building in every public school in the state will post the state motto, which is "In God We Trust"? It's a subtle way of saying that for you to be the best citizen you can be, and the best American, and the most patriotic American, you will subscribe to a God, and we all know what God they're talking about. So it goes beyond the gridiron right into the classroom, doesn't it?
And it so expands the dominant religion's freedom of religion that it can't help but restrict or reduce the freedom of religion of everyone else on the planet, or at least everyone else in their circle of influence.
Yeah, whenever a government official promotes their own religion, they are stomping on religious liberty and religious freedom.
Curbing someone else's freedom.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Whenever government gets involved, then they end up affecting that. And I've heard several times, and most recently from Andrew Seidel, the attorney from Freedom from Religion Foundation, say we cannot have freedom of religion unless we have a government that is free from religion.
Exactly. That's exactly what is written into our Constitution, and the entire basis of our form of government is the notion that it is entirely secular and entirely indifferent to whatever religious claims are made. The Founding Fathers had the experience of all the religious wars that went on in Europe prior to the founding of the United States, and they knew full well that as diverse as the religious expressions were in this country, that some sort of mechanism needed to be applied that would guarantee peace for every citizen. And the best way to do that is simply by exempting religion from any kind of official recognition, except, of course, in the individual case of being able to express your ideas. Other than that, there is none.
Right. And we need to work hard to keep these venues secular as opposed to equal. And what I mean by that is, invocations we're participating in because we've been told by the Supreme Court that everyone can and these are going to happen. So I call that an equal, kind of an equal basis. But whenever possible, we want to have secularism in government, because atheists and Jews and Muslims and Buddhists and Satanists and non-religious people cannot compete on equal terms with Christianity. So there's not going to be any fairness in government if we're permitted some sort of equality, an equal status, because we cannot put the resources together and the people together to participate on an equal basis.
It seems to me that if religion and sporting events in particular are in some way connected, that we could prove or disprove this. All we have to do is check with the bookies in Las Vegas. And all we have to know is, well, should I bet on SMU or Baylor? One of which is, of course, Southern Methodist, and Baylor's a big Baptist university. So if they had the answer to that question, then we'd have some definitive proof that SMU could pray better than Baylor.
Which brings up another point. In all these various prayers, some deity or another is going to be offended, because you got to choose between the Baptist God and the Presbyterian God and the Methodist God, and somebody's going to be really hacked off, and it'll be catastrophe.
Yeah, somebody.
Well, David, are you doing anything about that issue that I mentioned earlier about posting the state motto in all the buildings in the public schools of your area?
Actually, we have not. We've noticed that you guys are engaged and other folks are engaged. Our parent organization, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, is looking for issues in schools that go above and beyond just posting the motto. And for instance, Marion County had a poster contest where kids would put together a poster for the "In God We Trust," for the schools, and in other cases where teachers are proselytizing or making note of the motto. I mean, any odd cases where someone's done more than just post the motto may be an opportunity for attorneys to be involved and for a complaint to be filed. But at this point, we have really run out of options when it comes to the state motto on its own. It has been found to be, just basically a non-religious statement by the courts, which is which is utter nonsense. But this is where the courts have gone to, and it doesn't have to be true. It just has to be consistent, and that's where they've consistently gone recently. So there's not a whole lot we can do unless someone does something more than just post the motto. And if they do, then the Freedom from Religion Foundation wants to hear about it.
What fascinates me is that they should be posting the First Amendment to the Constitution, because that really embodies all the civil liberties and freedoms that we have in this country, instead of something that's trying to imply that we all have faith in a God, if we or trust in a God. If we did, why do we have a military? Why do we have hospitals? Hell, for that matter, why do we educate people? Just have faith you'll win the lottery. You don't need to go out and earn a living. Joe, you want to what? Give us a quote?
Oh, yes, we did. We do have our quote of the day. Luckily, it's a quickie and it's short. And it is, tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. That's from Sir Isaac Newton. Been around a while. Okay.
A man who didn't exactly practice what he preached.
Not always.
But the word is still good, nevertheless. It's good point, so to speak.
David, we talked earlier on the program about how Jim and Joe became atheists. I would presume that you had some sort of a conversion event in your life. If so, could you tell us quickly about it in the, 6-7 minutes we have remaining?
Yeah, it was called birth.
Okay.
That's how I became an atheist. I was not raised to believe in God.
Wow.
I was raised by a Christian family who probably would have and always checked Christian on a survey if they were asked. But we never really went to church, other than with family for holidays and weddings and funerals and stuff, and that was few and far between. And I found myself living in most of the Deep South most of my life, but I didn't have the pressure and the oppression of most religious minorities that we hear about in the worst cases, and I feel very fortunate for that. But I didn't think of myself as an atheist or a humanist or a scientific skeptic or anything. Not even, I think I probably would have thought about it as agnostic, but I don't even remember grabbing that label. But I was watching Family Guy about 15 years ago, and Brian the dog was talking about Richard Dawkins' God delusion.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Well, this must be a sign from above, so I better read this. And I did. And I realized that religion is not just standing by like most people in society, just kind of participating when appropriate and not getting involved when it's not appropriate. It is actually being used as a tool to cause some harm in the world. Now, there's good along with that. My friends in the clergy and I talk about this all the time. There's good religion and there's bad religion, and I realized the bad religion that exists when I read that book, and then I got involved in the separation of church and state and community organizing, even with you guys several years ago as well. So that's been a draw for me. And when I moved to Central Florida, we started the Central Florida Free Thought community, where we're building a community the way you guys are in Tampa, having monthly meetings, having a lot of social events, and
doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
I would like to add that Richard Dawkins points out that the problem with good religion is that it gives the cover for bad religion. Sam Harris makes that same point.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that, and it's hard to distinguish those two things, but we've got to continue to work with people, religious and non-religious, who care about the same values that we all share. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to push forward and keep religion out of government, and building a safe place where non-religious people can get together and feel okay with themselves and not be continually brushed aside as treated as second-class citizens.
Yeah, but it seems that the effort really is a national, federal effort being led by our Vice President Mike Dent's, assistance from Betsy DeVos and former EPA Director Scott Pruitt, who really are seeking to dismantle from within the very departments that exist for our education and environmental protection to convert the country into a polluted theocracy. But, do you have any comments on what's going on the federal level?
No, I couldn't say it any better than that, Ed. That was brilliant. But I would say this. Let's not spend more than one day a month stared at the TV and watching hearings of the Senate. Let's make sure that we're acting locally. Know your senators in the state, know your representatives in the state, know your mayors and commissioners, and make sure that they are not doing the kind of things they shouldn't be doing. Instead of dreading what the next tweet from President Trump is going to be, do something locally to get to know the people that you can actually affect a change with.
And vote. Don't get overconfident. Get out there and vote, right?
Yeah, get out there and participate. In our country right now, social activity, interaction with people is at a pretty low ebb. People don't join clubs and associations the same way that they used to. So people need to get out there, talk to other people, take a responsible position. There's lots of ways in which you can fulfill requirements of citizenship besides voting.
Absolutely. Testifying in the U.S. Senate is one of them.
Let's all do it.
I wish I could.
So let's see, 11th Court of Appeals, that's up in Atlanta, I think, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
And so, okay, so we might be hearing from you soon on the appeal?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope to talk about it, yeah.
All right, yeah, and we'll ask you to bring us up to date as events evolve in this particular issue. Okay?
Very good.
All right. Well, thanks, David. And how's Jocelyn? Sorry.
I will.
Okay, great.
It's been great to hear from you.
Yes, keep up the good work
Yes, sir.
at your end, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right. Next week, we don't have any idea what we'll be talking about, but we'll be here on the Atheist Forum on the Tan Talk.
Have we ever known what we're talking about?
Well, we usually do a little
Not even when we get done.
But anyway, if if you're impressed by what David has said and the ideas that we need to really keep this country and our state and our local community governments secular, so that we all have true freedom of religion, which is the only way to have it, then you may want to consider joining Atheists of Florida or even looking into it. When you find us on our website, on the internet,
yes.
very easy to do.
AOF.NGO.
If you just would like to be around atheists, then it's a good place to find them. So, because we're never trying to talk anybody into going to any church or religious event, and you can live your life completely free of religion. So I hope you'll join us again next week here on the forum, along with Joe and Jim. I'm Ed Golly, reminding you, if the story seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it. Just because somebody wrote it down,
Make them
Prove it.
You have been listening to the Atheist Forum. To learn more about Atheists of Florida, visit our website at atheistofflorida.com. Continue the discussion on our website, talk.aof.ngo. And join us again next Friday for another edition of the Atheist Forum here on Tan Talk 1340.
WTAN, Clearwater,
FM 106.1,
WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay, WZHR, Zephyr Hills,
FM 104.3.
Listen.
Special Report Kavanaugh Committee vote. A stunning development as the Senate Judiciary Committee's Republican majority votes to advance the confirmation to the Supreme Court of Brett Kavanaugh, but with a last-minute concession to Senator Jeff Flake.
And I think it would be proper to delay the floor vote for up to, but not more than 1 week, in order to let the FBI continue to do an investigation limited in time and scope to the current allegations that are there.
Senator Lindsey Graham had resisted Democratic efforts for an FBI investigation.
Jeff's a really good guy. I wouldn't have done it.